This is an old story that comes up with a lot of businessmen. And this can happen with anyone, that the family starts to be forsaken. And so the idea here is this, that you can put so much effort. You can wake up early, get the job done, stay up late, making sure you hammer out all the details, and you're doing all this. But if you have forgotten God in the process and His ways and what is priority to Him, any moment it can all come crashing down. But right at the end of this is where it says this, this is how He gives to His beloved sleep. It's a little bit of a strange verse right there. He's giving sleep, but then there's sleep that doesn't do you any good. Well, what He's saying is there's a type of sleep that is peaceful because behind the scenes there's someone else who isn't sleeping. And who is that someone else who is not sleeping while you're getting your rest? When you do things God's way, He's working even while you are sleeping. He's taking care of your project when you're incapacitated. Whether you're sick or you feel like you can't be a part of something. When there's things holding you back and it seems like the project or the things that you're trying to achieve have grown too big and they're getting out of control. But when you remember God through the entire process, at some point you know that you can just stop and get your rest because there's someone else who has you guarded. When you can't guard the city, who is guarding the city? God. Whenever you can't get any more work done on the project, who is someone else who somehow is making the project move forward when you can't do it? God. This applies to everything in life. I really like to apply this to men a lot, but this applies to women as well. At some point you feel like you're failing. At some point you feel like you got too much on your plate. At some point you've got to focus back on God and trust that while you focus on God, while you get your rest, while you take your Sabbath day rest or whatever it might be, someone else is keeping your interest in mind who has way more power to take care of them than you have power to take care of them. Do not forget God. Now, how in the world is this going to line up with the next part where it says, behold, children are a gift from the Lord? This has been perplexing to a lot of people before. Why is it suddenly just talk about children? This is what I think. Because I'm a man, and I understand that there are times when things pull you away from some things that you should be focused on. Things will pull you away from understanding the value system that you should have. So can everyone just be with me on this? I think this is what it means. We have lots of things that are important to us, projects that we work on, with jobs, or people who have dreams that they're working on. I've known people who are poets, musicians, lawyers. I know several politicians, all working on these things that mean so much to them. But also I notice that every single one of these people that I know, they have a family. At some point, we have to recognize and balance everything out. And where is our priority really supposed to be? Why does it interrupt this talk about building and guarding things? And these things that seem like these big things. You know, sometimes we get into politics and we talk about these big things. We talk about the things that are affecting this and that. But you know what's even more important than all of these things? Is you taking care of your family. That's why it stops and it interrupts all of it and it says, hey, you have a great gift in children. And it goes ahead and it says, the fruit of the womb is a reward. Now, this is the opposite of the approach of modern America. Fruit of the womb is not a reward in the eyes of many people. Matter of fact, it's a burden. And for many, particularly in the form of abortion, it's a great burden. and that it's something to be thrown away in the trash. There are people who say things like, well, the reason abortion needs to be there, even though it's murder, the reason it needs to exist is because there are people who will grow up unloved. There are people who will grow up poor. There are people who might grow up handicapped. There are people who will grow up with great disadvantage. And it's just a horrible, horrible torture to put upon them the burden of living. And I remember someone responding to that and saying, you know what? I grew up in a one-parent home. I grew up poor, and I grew up abused. And life was hard. And you want to know what made life even harder for me was people like you who said I'd be better off dead. Our nation does not value children anymore. They don't value family. But God says something completely different here. He says, 1, they are a blessing. 2, they are a reward. And particularly in the ancient times, well, I'll put it this way. Did you know that there are societies still in this world? There is no government to fall back on. There is no social security to lift you up. What is the one thing when you are falling all the way and life is destroying you, what is the one system that God has put around you that was always intended to be your security? Your family. That's good. It is. You know, I'm not oblivious to the fact that there are lots of American men who wouldn't want their mother-in-law living with them. I want my mother-in-law living with me. There are many reasons why I want my mother-in-law living with me. One of them is this. Her being with us sends a powerful message to my children about family. And what I tell my boys all the time is, if your family isn't going to be there for you, don't expect any human to be there for you. But they're supposed to be there for you. And I always tell them, there's 3 of you. A 3-strand cord cannot be broken, but one can be snapped in half. God has always intended for us to respect the structure. But these days we have all these different things that we think can uphold us, and we don't need family, and we can abandon family easily. People do this all the time. You know why? Because we live in a time where things can be so easy for an American that you don't even need family. And this is vile and evil, and that's why we can throw children away like trash at the abortion mill over and over and over. But this is what's happening in America is this. We are throwing away children, and then I've been around long enough to see people throwing away the elderly. I've seen it with my own eyes. It all comes back because if one person has no value, none of us have value other than if we can provide something for somebody else. And so once it gets to the point that, you know what, I might have to take care of this or that, nobody wants that. So kids, you know what? Kids, you got to take care of. They don't take care of me, I take care of them. But in America, if it comes down to a situation like that, that's someone who's got no value, so I got to throw them away. And the elderly, at some point, you know what? The elderly isn't going to be the person who's always going to be taking care of me. So at some point we start to go, well, you know, maybe they'd be better off just sitting in front of a mind-numbing television inside of some building surrounded by a whole bunch of other elderly people all the time. And we'll forget that they're there and we won't ever go visit them. But you know what? At least they got the prices right. It's a form of pre-abortion, isn't it, Ruth? We're throwing them away, right? I know, I can be kind of funny sometimes, the way I say stuff. I'm sarcastic. If that makes it easier to swallow, that's good. But this is a problem. family is being thrown away. Now, but this is the mindset, and this is how it all turns. And I want this to forever shape your thinking of family. When it says, like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of your youth. All right, so what is family? Family is an army. Family is war. Now, when you get this in your head, now you're ready for life. In a real sense, particularly in America, every family is at war with all that is around it. And there's a warrior. In this case, the image is like a father. And the father is like this warrior standing in a battle. And he needs weapons, right here, like arrows in the hands of a warrior. You're fighting for the kingdom of God. Every child, every baby ever born was intended to be a weapon in the kingdom of God against the kingdom of darkness. And that they're supposed to be handled with skill and integrity. And you're supposed to know what you're doing with them. And a warrior who doesn't know what he's doing with his arrows, with his swords, with his weapons, is going to die. And so what God is saying to these people is, unless the Lord is inside of the way you're approaching this stuff, it's all being done in vain. Your nation can fall if you don't put things right. Your building projects will come to nothing unless you do things God's way. And what he's saying to Israel here is, family, family, family. If you focus on that project first, all of your projects will be secured. That is the way God is giving the blessing. He's not just saying, well, their presence happens to make you jolly. He's not saying, it kind of makes me feel good to look at them while they play. No, he's meaning in a very real way. There are things in your life, things about society, things about America that will be secured if we all turn back to the priority of understanding the value of children. Now you got to understand, this is revolutionary thinking for these ancient times. In ancient times, children were almost nothing to most cultures. They would throw them away like that. We abort them, we throw them away, we sacrifice them. But back then, often they'd just, if they were born, they'd look at them and say, well, this one's a little bit weird. This one's a redhead. I'll leave this one out for the wolves to get them. That was the mindset of the ancient world. Harsh, brutal, but not for the Jews. The Jews were instructed by God, you value those children. They will make Israel strong. They are your weapons. And if you run out of arrows, you will be in big trouble. And that's what it says. It said, so are the children of youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is not full of them or full of them. Full of them. Very good, very good. So what happens here is that, imagine you're in the middle of a battle. Do you want more arrows with you or less arrows with you?
More arrows.
Yeah, would a warrior ever go, thank the Lord I got rid of about 3 or 4 of those arrows. They were getting kind of heavy. They made me kind of slow in battle. No, there comes that moment when you thank the Lord God that you got one more back there. Thank the Lord you have them. And in America, we're taking the arrows out of our quiver and we're snapping them. And that's why we're going to go down if we do not respect the value of children and family. So the idea here is also, it goes further and it gets real practical. I want you to see this, and we'll probably close with this right here, where it says, blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. This is the exact opposite of people's thinking. People don't think they might be blessed by a ton of children. They think they're blessed by having none. Why? Because they believe that the only blessing attached to children is sexual gratification. They don't see that the whole machinery, function, biology that's connected with sexuality might bring something good to them, like children, beyond even just their lust. But it says this, and this is talking about the person who has the full quiver of children. It says, they will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies at the gate. This is a very, very militaristic, almost violent image, and this is the image. The idea is this, is that you have a man who's going to treaty with his enemies, maybe before a battle or a break in a battle, all right? His enemies. And the idea is that you have a father who's leading kind of the clan. And the father comes to probably confront his enemies and make terms and speak with them. Maybe they're going to go to war. Maybe they'll have peace. Maybe they'll come to some kind of agreement. But the idea is that when this father stands against the world, he does not stand alone. He's got all these with him. He's got his family with him. He's got his backup. Now, this is very serious to the Jew. We don't think of this these days in quite the same way. Every time I teach this passage, I think of the Maccabean War, where you have kind of the leader of the Jewish clan of the Maccabees who stood toe-to-toe in war against the Greeks. And all the generals of his army were, guess who? His sons. And so when you went and you talked to Judas Maccabees, you weren't just talking to one man. You were talking to an army. You mess with one, you mess with them all. And the idea is that God is telling Israel, because isn't Israel really all just one big family? They're all descendants from Abraham, right? They're all descendants. They're one big family. And this family has been a wrecking crew on its way out of Egypt. And on its way out of Egypt, it crushed army after army after army after army as one family, marching until they messed it up themselves and had to stay in the wilderness for 40 years. But once they got on track and they entered into the promised land with Joshua at their head, that family was a wrecking crew that's fame went throughout the whole area. Because if you mess with them, you didn't just mess with them, you messed with their family and you messed with their God. And that God brought down the walls of Jericho. Now, did the watchmen do Jericho any good? The watchman on the wall? When suddenly the wall's not there anymore. Which group was building their nation with God? That God was building the house with them. Because eventually they would build the house of God. And they would build the nation of God. And it was all as they bound together as one. We've got to do that with our family. And that's one of the reasons I always encourage everybody. Some of the greatest joy you will have in life will come through family. Some of the greatest security you'll ever have in life will come through family. When no one else is there for you. When the IRS is going to come after you. When the taxes are crushing you. When you get fired. When everything goes bad, there's a... Yep. And you want to know how many people will not be there when you are in the hospital on a ventilator? Family will be there.
Family loves family.
That's right. Family loves family. Family takes care of family. This is what will bring joy to your life. And of course, I think that our older members of the church, no one has to tell you this. You get this part. You've lived it. Family is everything. You see it clearly in your older years, don't you? Family. You see how all along this is what secured life. But anyway, we'll close with that because ultimately, the family we want to be inside of is the family of God. Because unless the Lord builds the house, you build it in vain. Let's go to the Lord in prayer.